Have you ever felt like life is moving too slowly for you? Like everyone else is racing ahead while you are still struggling just to survive? Sometimes we pray for success, but when results take time, we become frustrated. We compare ourselves with others, we lose patience. And many people quit right before life was about to change for them. But life has a quiet truth. The people who move slowly with patience often travel farther than those who rush without direction. My name is Ion, and today's story is about a donkey who taught an entire village the true meaning of patience. In a small dry village surrounded by mountains, there lived a poor farmer named Zach. Zach was not rich, he was not powerful. He owned only a tiny house, a few old farming tools, and one weak donkey named Speed. Now, despite his name, Speed was anything but fast. He walked slowly, his body looked thin and tired. His fur was dusty from years of hard work. Whenever villagers saw Zach and Speed walking together, they laughed. "Why do you still keep that useless donkey? He's too old. He's too slow. You'll never succeed with an animal like that." But Zach always smiled calmly and replied with the same words, "Slow does not mean useless." Every morning before sunrise, Zach loaded vegetables onto Speed's back and walked many miles to the market. The roads were rough, the weather was hot, and faster farmers riding horses always reached the market first. By the time Zach arrived, many customers were already gone. Some days he sold almost nothing. Some days he returned home exhausted with unsold vegetables and barely enough money for food. One evening after another disappointing day, Zach sat quietly outside his house. The sky was darkening, the wind moved softly through the village. He looked at the ground and whispered sadly, "I work every single day, but nothing changes." At that moment, Speed slowly walked toward him and gently rested his head against Zach's shoulder. Zach smiled weakly. "At least you understand me." The next morning, Zach made an unusual decision. Instead of taking the main road to the market like everyone else, he chose a longer mountain path. The villagers laughed even harder. "Your donkey is already slow, and now you're choosing the hardest road." But Zach ignored them and continued walking through the mountains with Speed beside him. As they traveled, Zach noticed something strange. Along the mountain road were wild fruit trees, fresh springs of water, and tired travelers passing through. Most people avoided the mountain path because it was difficult and dangerous, which meant nobody was selling food there. Zach stopped walking. A thought entered his mind. The next day, he packed extra fruits and water along with his vegetables. As travelers crossed the mountain road, thirsty and exhausted, they happily bought from him. For the first time in months, Zach returned home with extra money in his pocket. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Slowly, travelers began waiting for Zach on the mountain path every day. They trusted him because he was patient, honest, and dependable. Meanwhile, the farmers using the fast road faced endless competition. Prices dropped, arguments increased. Many returned home angry and frustrated. But Zach quietly continued his slow journey with Speed, step by step, day by day. One afternoon, a wealthy merchant traveling through the mountains noticed something unusual. A traveler had fallen and injured himself on the rocky path. While others walked past, Zach stopped to help him without expecting anything in return. The merchant watched silently as Speed stood patiently beside them carrying heavy supplies without complaint. The merchant approached Zach and said, "You are different from most people." Zach smiled gently. "Life taught me patience." The merchant nodded thoughtfully and made him an offer. "I need someone honest to transport goods through these mountains every week. Most people refuse because the road is difficult. Will you do it?" Without hesitation, Zach agreed. And that single opportunity slowly changed his life forever. Over the next few years, Zach earned enough money to repair his house, buy more land, and live peacefully. But despite his success, he never forgot Speed. Every morning, He still walked beside his old donkey through the mountain road. One day, a young boy asked him curiously, "How did you become successful?" Zach looked at Speed and smiled warmly. "Because of him," the boy frowned. "But he's just a donkey." Zach shook his head gently. "No, he taught me the greatest lesson of my life." The boy sat beside him quietly. Zach continued, "Everyone wanted speed. Everyone wanted quick success. They laughed at slow progress. But this donkey showed me something powerful. Slow steps still move forward. Patience still reaches the destination." Years later, disaster struck the village. A terrible storm destroyed the main road completely. Trade stopped overnight. Farmers who depended on the fast road lost everything, but something surprising happened. The mountain path Zach had used for years remained safe because it was built on stronger ground. Now the entire village depended on Zach's route for food and supplies. The same villagers who once mocked Speed now stood silently watching him carry supplies through the mountains. One old villager lowered his head in shame and said softly, "We judged him because he was slow." Zach replied calmly, "The world often laughs at patience because it cannot see the future." That night, Zach sat beside Speed under the stars. Speed had grown very old now. His steps were weaker than ever before. Zach gently touched his head and whispered, "You carried more than vegetables. You carried my dreams when nobody believed in me." A few days later, Speed died peacefully near the mountain road. They had traveled together for years. Zach buried him beneath a large tree overlooking the valley. And soon, people from the village began visiting the place because by then everyone knew the story of the patient donkey. Near the grave, Zach placed a small wooden sign. It read, "Fast people may arrive early, but patient people arrive stronger." And maybe that is the lesson any of us need today. Patience does not mean doing nothing. Patience means continuing even when results are invisible. Most people destroy their future because they cannot survive temporary discomfort. They quit too soon. They panic too quickly. They abandon the journey before the reward appears. But success is not always about talent, and it is not always about speed. Sometimes success belongs to the person who simply refuses to stop. A tree takes years before giving fruit. A river cuts through rock not because of power, but because of consistency. And just like Speed the donkey, sometimes the slowest journey creates the strongest life. So if life feels slow right now, do not lose hope. Your patience may be building something far greater than you can currently see. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe to Tales by Hasiba for more emotional and motivational stories that help you understand life, improve your English, and grow stronger little by little.